So we got you here. All right, so now we talked about the general nature of these things, and we talked a bit more about the vulnerabilities that have been found so far. There's been a ton of these. There were infections that targeted your home routers, and there have been several botnets of Internet of Things devices with default passwords. One of the big ones was a guy that took over 100,000 home routers and used them to scan the entire Internet, which was a monstrous crime. I mean, he could be, but apparently never got caught. But I mean, he'd be prosecuted for like 10,000 counts of hacking in every country on earth or something if he got caught. This one targeted your cable modems. Windows Mobile, just like every other version of every other operating system, has an endless chain of vulnerabilities: weak password obfuscation, overly long denial of name, denial of service, and so on. Just like everything else, there's an endless series of vulnerabilities, and if you don't patch them, you can hack them. But the problem with these devices is there's typically no way to patch them, no way to update them. Yeah?
What's the difference between like regular OS and embedded OS?
The fundamental difference is that it doesn't serve a general purpose. It doesn't really have a keyboard. You can't really open a window and click a start button and go to a wide variety of things. It's specialized for only one purpose. But under the hood, the chips inside the OS are pretty much the same, except usually an embedded system doesn't bother having a hard drive. It's just got something in like flash memory, but it could. Yeah?
The Windows vulnerability will be like, Nokia will be considered as a Windows device, right?
Now it would. No, Nokia had their own OS, and then Microsoft bought them, and then Microsoft dumped them again. So now they had Symbian. Then they were going to move to Windows Mobile, but Windows Mobile is pretty much abandoned now, so they're going to spin off, probably have something else. But for a while, some of their phones did run Windows. Anyway, people say Windows 8 Mobile is actually a very good product, but it didn't get any market share, so nobody cares. But like I went to a hacking conference, and a guy there figured out how to hack Windows phones, and he had 300 people. He said, the problem with this is how many people have Windows Phone? Not one hand goes up. And he, yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
Do you consider OSs for mobile phones, like Android? Is that an embedded?
Android is a milestone in security. It was Google's contribution to prove that Linux can be just as crappy as Windows. Android is fantastically insecure because Google does not control it very well, so people put on horrible versions of it with all the security features turned off, and the carriers block the updates. So the number of Android phones that are actually up to date is less than 1%, and many of them are 2 years out of date. The fundamental problem with all these things is they don't get updated enough, and that is the worst thing you can do. There was a survey about 6 months ago of amateurs. If you ask amateurs what's saving them from security, they believe it's antivirus. Professionals, that's not even in the top 10. They say, you got to be kidding. What saves you is updates. Because when people find a problem, you fix the problem. If you don't fix the problem, everybody knows how to walk right in. And any kind of device that you can't update frequently, periodically, is just wide open for exploitation. And that's in this class. Your Project 2 and you take over this thing because they're running an old version of FTP server that hasn't been updated. Yeah?
Isn't like updates also dangerous? More than updates?
Updates have some risk of breaking the device and bringing in a new bug, but if you don't update, you're wide open. It's a sure thing. You might as well have a default password. I mean, there's just an attack. Like every year, there's at least a couple extraordinary attacks that'll just totally take the thing over. And if you don't patch, you've got a hole just sitting there. If you patch, you have some reasonable assurance of fixing the hole plus some problems. This is why, people like Chrome started it, I think, forcing the updates on you. You never update Chrome. It happens automatically. Then now Firefox does, and now Microsoft does it to the whole OS because they're trying to address the biggest security problem. The problem is they write really rotten updates that cause problems all the time instead of testing them enough, but hopefully they'll get over that at some point. But these devices typically don't update. And even if they can update, most people choose not to update them because they want them to keep working. Yeah.
My question is just about categorizing the operating systems. Do you put those in the same category as embedded operating systems, or?
Android can be used in either way, like every operating system. It can be in a small device that has only one function, or it can be in like a tablet or computer that has all the functions. So it's the operating system. It's just a question of how stripped down it is and sort of how it's presented. Like one thing I wanted to add, and I wasn't quite sure what to do with, was the Raspberry Pi. I've got these Raspberry Pis, but I don't know if you really want to call them embedded. They have almost all the features of the line is blurry, like I say, and that's why they could not define what a tablet is and make a clear line between tablets and other things. There's like just sort of a smooth, gradual continuum from something that really can be used for everything. You can put on Microsoft Office and play games, and something where you really can't do much except cash transactions or something. Anyway, so the attacks have been getting more and more serious as hackers get better at hacking these things, and people add computer and internet functionality to things that never had it before. So ATM machines are obviously vulnerable. There's a bunch of these. The simplest thing is card skimmers. They manufacture these things. You can buy them in underground forums, on Russian forums constantly. You can get a special plastic skimmer designed to fit right on the face of any brand of ATM with exactly the same plastic and the same color and everything. And now it adds a magnetic reader that will make a copy of the mag stripe and a camera that will watch the pins and send it someplace. And they're all over the place. And Brian Krebs has had tons of articles about this. In fact, he says when you go to an ATM, you should like pull on it and yank on it and see if it's loose and look for scratches and before you use it. And so in Utah, about 3 years ago, there were 158 credit card readers at gas stations that had skimmers put on them, and they put them entirely inside the pump. Open up the pump, put electronics in there that would read the data and send it by Wi-Fi to a car park nearby. And there's no way you could tell at all. There was no outside evidence. Yeah?
What do you think about security when it comes down to
IA?
Artificial intelligence?
Oh, AI. AI is coming. See, AI just didn't work until recently, so it was not important in that regard. Lately, AI really works, and the first report just came out last week of people trying to hack AI and finding, of course, it's completely insecure right now. Nobody's thought about that. I mean, the first thing they're trying to do is make it work at all, and they have not even begun to think about how to make it secure for malicious attacks. So they found a lot of ways to hack the current generation of AIs. So these movies with the Terminator and stuff, there's a lot of that stuff is coming in some variety or the other. We're going to have these trusted devices driving cars and shooting guns, and the first generation, like when they had the drones in Iraq. They sent drones to Iraq so we could fly them over and see what the enemy is doing. They didn't encrypt anything, so the bad guys could just tune in and see the signal too, and take over the things and land them and stuff. They didn't think about security at all. They just made it work. And in Central America, I think in Portugal and down there, the local peasants figured out that they could take discarded telephone antennas and they could send signals up to American spy satellites that would just repeat them, and they made their own illegal phone calls with it. You could just send signals to satellites, just record down here. You could make a free Wi-Fi phone transmitter out of it. Just so because the satellites had no security, and the spy satellites did. And people don't think of it in the first generation of anything. They're just proud it works at all, and they don't think about security until the next generation after they get hacked. Yeah.
On a scale of like 1 to 10,
Yeah.
how much better are companies getting at making their product more secure?
Companies that have been around for a while, like Apple and Google, get forced to pay attention to security. But there's always, for every one of them, there's 100 new ones that just started this week, and they haven't done that yet. And they always start by making crap that's vulnerable because they don't even know what they're doing. And then they lie about it for a while. And then they get reports and they tell everyone to just shut up for a while. And then they try to patch it with something cheap and easy for a while. And this takes about 5 or 10 years of generation after generation of complete crap before they finally realize you really have to write better stuff. But I think the whole cycle is happening faster now. But what we don't have at all is some kind of general sweeping security technology to add to these things. Everybody can just build something in their garage and start selling it, and there's no easy way to make it secure. You actually have to try harder, and that's what would really change it, is if there was something you could invent like a firewall that you could just add to all of it and make them better. And we're nowhere near that.
Actually, Netgear is doing a better job in making their router smarter. So if you already have a network with a certain IP address, it will change the IP address for you on their router.
Yeah, that's Netgear. And I used to think, it wasn't Netgear, it was another one of those companies. I thought of them as being pretty secure. And then they bought a Chinese company, rebranded their stuff, and they're not as bad as the others because they bought a bunch of insecure products and built them in. And this keeps happening to Microsoft because Microsoft is like Windows is like the Frankenstein monster. They just buy a company and just patch in their stuff, and buy a company and patch in their stuff and sew it all together. And so they keep buying companies that have insecure products and adding them to Windows, and then suddenly there's a hole. They're better at that. Microsoft is now a leader in security, but it is a very difficult problem. Like in the military, you have a military base, all these guys have computers and stuff. How do you really know that those guys aren't doing the wrong thing? Well, you can have inspections and stuff, but a lot of them are in fact doing the wrong thing, and it's just too difficult to make sure they aren't. Yeah.
So you're saying Microsoft is a leader in security versus like other companies like
Yes.
Apple? And
Like Google and Apple, yes, absolutely. Apple and Google are way behind Microsoft because they didn't have a security problem until recently. Microsoft started having these problems more than 10 years ago, and they started fixing them more than 10 years ago. So they have a whole mature program of reviews of software. And the other company, like Apple, until like 4 years ago, Apple would just blatantly lie about their security problems. When the first malware came out and infected Macs, Mac used to have like on there, but it's like 4 reasons to buy a Mac, and one of them was no viruses, no security problems. And so then they blocked an update. This is the fatal, they blocked an update for the PDF reader for 6 weeks. And so they got a worm that would infect your Mac, and people got infected, and they would call Apple tech support. And Apple sent a memo to the tech support people saying, if someone calls and they're infected with this, do not confirm this. Tell them it's impossible. There is no malware. Just hang up the phone on them. We will not talk about it. Just tell them to go away. And then someone leaked that memo. And they were so embarrassed, they actually had to admit that there's malware on the Mac, and they actually had to have this thing like Microsoft's malicious software removal tool. Now your updates from Apple include something to hunt for the known malware and try to remove it, and they had to take that bullet point off. And now there's only 3 reasons to buy a Mac. Because they totally, and by blocking updates, they lost this perfect security record they had. And that's what happened to Android. So anyway, so as we know, the OSs are everywhere. This has been true since the year 2000. Now it's impossible for anybody to deny it. Now your light bulbs have IP addresses. It's just crazy. But the Y2K was when most people became aware of how many things are computerized, like even your water pump and everything else. And that was the point here, was that people had built a bunch of software in the 60s and 70s and 80s and built it into big infrastructure like water filtration systems at sewage plants and traffic lights and everything, and all that stuff was written in COBOL. And COBOL actually stored the year as a 2-digit base 10 number, 67, 68, 69. So when it went from 1999 to 2000, it thought it was now 1900. And therefore it would be the wrong day of the week, and the elevators and the heaters and everything would be on the wrong place. And some people got like bills for $1 million because it looks like your phone call was 100 years long and stuff like that. And nobody even knew how to write COBOL anymore, so they actually had a giant government effort to fix this, to fix the Y2K problem, and they actually got a bunch of programmers out of retirement to come back and fix all the COBOL code, and it largely worked. But when it first came out, people thought airplanes would be falling from the sky and the lights would go out and nuclear bombs would go off and it would be the end of civilization. And in fact, nothing much happened, and people said you were just lying, but it's somewhere in between. There were some problems, and he fixed a bunch of problems. And anyway, but that woke up everybody to how computerized everything was when people did not realize that everything is really a computer now.
You have the military track too. You show that chart that the government, this many government places are using Windows 10 or Windows 8.
Oh, well, they
show that too if you want.
Yeah, I don't know that one, but I know that.
No, you brought it up. You said you brought up did some search or something. It shows you like which part of the military, some military is using Windows 10. Yeah.
I don't recognize it from that description, but one thing I do know is that the military has strict cybersecurity rules, and then they have an audit every year, and they show that like 90% of them failing the rules. I mean, someone did write policy, but they don't actually implement the policy. So anyway, all right, so anyway, everything is connected to the network, and this is a problem. Like I say, they pretend they're going to air gap these things, but in fact, people don't. And that is the way to protect them. If you have some vulnerable thing like a expensive printer that's like got an old operating system, then the way to protect it is to put a VPN in front of it so only authorized people can get at it. That's how you protect it. But a lot of people don't. And I think I've got this video coming up that's fun about that. So anyway, they're also difficult to patch. People are reluctant to patch these important devices because they want them to keep working, and the patch has a chance of breaking it. And many manufacturers don't actually offer patches or a way to put on patches. They just want you to buy another one. HP is good at this. Just try finding an HP driver when you get a new OS. They never write it, they promise it, they don't provide it. Why should they? They want you to buy a new printer. They don't want to patch their old printer. They don't make any money that way. So the open source software is of course quite useful. And there's a whole ton of people are contributing to it, which is nice. But if you're going to fix a vulnerability, you have to consider, is it really worth fixing the vulnerability for the chance that it will stop? Large embedded systems like water plants, nobody patches them. And I've seen angry arguments at the security conventions where people say you should patch it, and they say, look, you try this. I'm going to call my boss and say, I'm going to turn off the water for a few hours to put on a patch, which might destroy it. It might not come back because of something that might happen. There's not a problem now, but I'm going to create a problem. How would you like that? You see, you'll be fired, and they won't put on a patch. What world are you living in? Nobody's going to put in patches for critical systems like that. You use them as long as they're working. You only fix them when they're broken. Are you nuts? Anyway, and so the pacemakers, here's one of the DEF CON studies of how dangerous the pacemakers are. A whole generation of these things designed with no thought of security or encryption or passwords or anything. So people can just send a signal like to turn on a TV and turn off your pacemaker because they didn't think of that, you know. And to be fair, it's not just that they're stupid, it's hard. They're worried about things like making it clean, making it work, making the battery last long enough so you don't have to cut you open again and change the battery and things like that. There's a bunch of issues they're solving, and our kind of computer security was not on the table as one of those issues. And so all your networking devices, your firewalls and routers and switches can be compromised, and this is more and more a popular attack, and there's currently no way to put antivirus or anything on your router or your firewall, but that's probably coming.
Actually, you can just change it to DDWRT. Most routers can do the other OpenWRT
Yeah,
as well.
you can, but that also has vulnerabilities.
How many?
Probably more, but they're not as common. It's the same thing if you use an off-brand router, an off-brand browser like Opera. It's probably more vulnerable, but there were less people attacking it. So in practice, you're all right for a while. Anyway, and there was a router hacking contest at DEF CON and other places that was just hilarious. They had beautiful bypasses that would take over every home router. And I haven't seen that stuff had been updated in a couple of years just because there hasn't been another big contest. But most of those home routers are quite vulnerable. And once someone takes over your router, then they can do lots of rotten things to you. This one was awesome. I remember a video with this one. I think Kirk pointed this one out to me a couple of years ago. This was a D-Link router, and all you had to do was send a web request to the web console panel with this user agent, which is backdoor backwards and a few other letters. And as soon as you did that, it switched to some kind of diagnostic mode where everybody who connected is now the administrator forever. And you couldn't turn it off without restoring it to factory defaults. It was bloody awesome. Yeah.
How easy is it to hack a home router? And like,
Very easy.
Which on a scale like, or like, is there like a like different kind of routers? Is there like a list of like which ones?
In general, there hasn't been, that's the whole problem in this business is security metrics. But in general, the cheaper they are, and the ones from China are usually terribly insecure. The other one, they're like a 1 out of 10, and the rest of them are like 2 out of 10. That's pretty much how it is. But I think some of them are getting better. But there ought to be patching your firmware. It's the same thing as everything else. If they're actually putting out patches and you're actually putting them on, then you're probably better off. Then at least these things don't stay this way forever. All right, and so all your printers, scanners, fax devices have these, hacking your printer is actually a pretty powerful attack, and this has been around since 2000, I think, Bugbear. Bugbear would infect your Windows 2000 network, and then it would infect the printer, so people would wipe all the hard drives, reinstall the OS, turn them on, and they're all infected again because it was hiding in the printer. That was the first trick there. And so, and the printer is a computer too, and you can infect it. So, and taking over a printer has a lot of entertaining effects. If you hack into a printer, printers have pages that they pop up on screen saying, oh, the printer is low, the printer's out of paper, it doesn't have that size of paper. You can put malware in that message. You can put links in there that go to malware. You can also just steal the print jobs. That's probably confidential stuff you're printing. You can also live in the printer and use it as a place to scan and attack more of the network, so you know, printers are just as important on your network as the routers and the switches and the computers. Yeah, and nowadays they're all open wirelessly. Yeah, so in these things, these pages that will pop up when people manage the printer, you can change these URLs to go to some place that will infect the machine, and people will be clicking on them trying to manage the printer. There's also printer update firmware, and most of these firmwares update by TFTP, so you can put up poison firmware if you can get on the local area network. So you can have a lot of fun with all this stuff. And then the ones called SCADA systems, or ICS, are the ones intended for industrial plants. I remember I went to Shodan and Googled these, and I found like a tomato juice canning factory in like Spain, where you could just totally control their automation system online. They're just connected to the internet. They often have no password or default password, and they're running factories and devices. This was one of the big steps forward with Project Aurora. Was in 2007, a U.S. military test where they performed a cyber attack on this diesel generator and caused it to blow up. And that was the time, see, until then, there were rumors of a virus that would destroy your computer, like wreck the hardware, but nobody believed it. And they proved you can do that. And this, as we now know, was part of the military program that eventually led to Stuxnet. And Stuxnet was when we did that to Iran. We blew up their nuclear isotope separators and physically destroyed the equipment with a virus. And it was a covert mission, and it was fantastically successful. And this saved a lot of lives. I mean, Israel is still ready to start a war with Iran over this, and it still hasn't happened. So we've had, maybe 6 or 7 years of a lot of people continuing to live that would have been dead if that war had happened. That when I was a kid, I watched this show called Star Trek, and the Klingons, they're going to have a virus, have bombs and everything to fight, and this superior race comes in and says, you people are shooting bombs at each other. This is horrible. They wave their magic wand. Poof, go away. Now your bombs don't work. You never come back either. And then we all go out, Iran's building nuclear bombs. We just go, poof, no nukes for you. Didn't have to kill anybody. Just a computer virus. This is the magic weapon that ends war without having anybody getting shot. A few people got killed because for like 2 years they couldn't make their nukes, and they finally decided that their own scientists were sabotaging it, so they were killing off their own scientists. And then when one of their scientists figured it out and started figuring out it was a virus, Israel sent a spy in to buzz by on a motorcycle and put a limpet bomb, blow up his car, and kill him. But this is just a few eggheads getting killed instead of whole battle lines of soldiers killing each other and blowing up hospitals and everything, which is what's going to happen when they finally build the bomb. So, we're moving into the world. So cyber war being a huge, important issue in military combat, where you can actually prevent an old-fashioned war with people dying and blowing things up with a cyber attack, and that's what we did. Anyway, so this guy is one of the people that pointed out the SCADA vulnerabilities and how nobody really uses air gaps. And this is the video I wanted to show you. I haven't played this here, have I? Okay, because this one is a crowd pleaser, but I don't know if I'm going to have sound. I think I found before. I can just play it through here and you'll get the gist of it. This one's worth seeing if you haven't seen it. 9Q. This is a Dell product. All right, there it is, remotely administered server. Let me turn this sound up so it's going to go. Oh, I better stop the recording.